Today we're going to talk about the legislative branch. We've talked about this a lot already, but we're going to go back and try to hit some of the things we might have missed doing our board game. So as you see these slides, if they have a star by them at the top, write them down. Otherwise, you don't have to write it down. You can pause and back up so you can write things and then listen, or you can back up and hear me again. So here's a map of the states that gained and lost after the 2010 census. So they lost representatives in the House of Representatives because of their population. So if you see down here, you can see Texas gained seats and New York lost seats, which means that their relative population changed, that Texas has more relative population than New York now. Not that they have more people necessarily, but that their populations changed. That New York's went down and Texas's went up versus what it was in 2000. So here's a little example to get you started. You got to write it down. You'll see it again. Thomas Jefferson once expressed his doubts about the usefulness of the Senate. "Why did you pour that coffee into your saucer?" George Washington asked. "To cool it," Jefferson replied. "Even so," Washington declared, "we pour legislation into the senatorial saucer to cool it." So we're going to try to figure out what he meant by this senatorial saucer. Why is he comparing the Senate to this saucer and the coffee? So we have to figure out how they're different first. One big difference is the percentage up for election every 2 years. So 100% of the House is up for election every 2 years. Remember, they serve 2-year terms. And 33% of the Senate, 1/3, is up for election every 2 years. Remember, they serve 6-year terms. So in North Carolina, our 2 senators are Kay Hagan, who's from Greensboro, and Richard Burr. Former senators are John Edwards, who's been in the news a lot recently, and Elizabeth Dole. So these senators are supposed to represent the entire state, not necessarily one district. So they don't represent Wilmington over Durham. They don't represent Raleigh over Asheville. They're supposed to represent the whole state. Here's the map of the U.S. House. So you can see if you go here in North Carolina, we have lots of different districts. They're all these different colors. So you would be right here in one of these districts. North Carolina has 12 districts. You can write this slide down. Each district should have the same population. So you can see 11, and if you're looking for 12, it's right up here. So here in Durham, you would be in District 4. Districts are supposed to be drawn so that they cover, big swatches of area, big large chunks of area with the same amount of people in each. In actuality, they are usually drawn to try to benefit political parties, especially the one that's in power. This is called gerrymandering. That's because the guy who came up with this name was Jerry, and he drew this district like this to benefit his party, the Democratic Republican Party, way back in the day. And this is the little creature that a cartoonist drew to make fun of his funny drawing of the district. So this is called a gerrymander. North Carolina has a very, very famous gerrymandered district. Maybe people know about it around the country. That is District 12 here, which runs along I-95. It has been drawn to try to get a minority representative in the House of Representatives for North Carolina because there are a lot of ethnic minorities that live right along here. So we're back to the cup and the saucer, and we're still trying to figure out why we would pour that coffee into the saucer. Jefferson says to cool it, and what Washington means when he says the Senate is meant to cool things too. So here's the explanation. The cup is the House. The saucer is the Senate. If the public is angry or upset about an issue, they can vote out 100% of the House every 2 years. So remember, I said the House of Representatives, people that serve there, are always concerned about getting reelected. As soon as they take office, they're concerned about how they're going to get reelected. And one thing they're concerned about is representing their constituents, people in their district, well, so that those people will vote them back in. They might try to get them money. They might try to advance their interests as far as legislation goes. But only 33% of the Senate is up for up for re-election every 2 years. So 2/3 of the Senate is protected from the hot tempers of the public. So if we all get really, really angry at the Senate, we can only vote out a third of them at a time. So if you're a representative, you have to listen to your constituents. You don't have any options. If you're a senator, you have a little bit of a luxury. You don't have to listen to your constituents every single moment. So here are some leadership positions. Some of them you might know from your board game, some of you might not. The Speaker of the House is the leader of the House. It's voted on by the representatives. So this is the third in line to become the president if both the president and the vice president die at the same time. It is currently John Boehner. He's from Ohio. He's a Republican. And the Speaker of the House is considered to be the most powerful person in the U.S. because they control which bills get voted on and when. Republicans and Democrats also elect leaders to represent their causes, mainly the minority leader. So when we say minority, we're not talking about a racial minority or an ethnic minority. We're talking about the minority party in Congress. Whips are things that both parties have. So there are Democratic whips, there are Republican whips, usually called majority and minority whips, depending on which party is the majority, which one has more people in the House at the time. And they are responsible for getting people on board with votes. So if I am the minority leader and we're trying to pass a bill, then I'm going to gather my whips up and we're going to try to talk to people and get them to vote with us on a particular issue or bill. The leadership of the Senate. The Vice President leads the Senate as the President of the Senate. We talked about this before. But the Vice President only votes to break ties and acts as the presence to remind the Senate of the President's wishes and power. So even though the branches are separate, you have the Vice President there to kind of show, hey, we're still connected, and Congress, we're still watching what you're doing, and we're still going to try to support certain legislation over other pieces of legislation. The senators also elect the President pro tempore. They only take charge when the vice president can't, and is usually the oldest person in the Senate. So for a long, long time, it was Robert Byrd, who is this dude up here, and he was 93 when he died in office a few years ago. Seniority means that the longer you've been in the Senate and House, the more power you have. Some people have been in the House a really, 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 really long time. Here are some other requirements. Since 1872, Congress has required all states to hold elections for senators and representatives on the same day. The congressional record is a written record of everything that happened that day, and is available online. So if you really wanted to see what happened in Congress today, you could look it up. People in Congress cannot be arrested or sued for something they say during a debate unless it is a criminal act. So unless it's already a crime, they can't be arrested for what their opinions are or what they would like to happen with legislation. This is called immunity, kind of like you're immune to a disease. You would be immune to being prosecuted for what you say on the floor of Congress. They also cannot hold another government job while serving in Congress. That way they don't pass a law or they don't put together a budget where they send their own department a lot of money and get rich from that. Congress's primary job is to make laws. Here are the enumerated powers of Congress, the express powers, the ones that are written in the Constitution. Make sure you write these down. One is to elect taxes for the common defense and general welfare. So taxes must be the same in all parts of the country. The federal government can't tax North Carolina more than it taxes California. They can tax certain people in North Carolina more like they do with the income tax. So they might say anybody who makes over $100,000 has to pay 28%, and anybody who makes under $100,000 has to pay 18%. But the numbers have to be the same for California and North Carolina. It also gives Congress the power to spend money. They can borrow money, usually through bonds, so they might sell savings bonds, or if you have like uptight grandparents like me, they might have bought you savings bonds when you were a kid instead of giving you money and you just rolled your eyes. But later they mature and these bonds are worth more, and that's a form of government borrowing money. You've paid for those bonds now, and then in several years you can cash them in and get more money than you originally paid. They pay out interest. They also establish laws on naturalization, the process by which an immigrant becomes an American citizen. That process we looked at, I think, on the second day of class. And they regulate trade. They can regulate trade between states or countries. They coin money, so they print our money. They determine the value of money, and they regulate weights and measures. They can punish counterfeiting. So if I decided I was going to start printing $100 bills in my basement, Congress would have the power to punish that. They established post offices and delivery of mail, which seems kind of unimportant to us then, but it was to us now, but it was really, really, really important to the founders to have a secure post office system. And is one reason that it's such a big crime to tamper with the mail. It's a federal crime to do anything that would mess with mail delivery. They develop a system of patents and copyrights so that people can receive compensation for their new ideas and encourage the development of new inventions. And they can establish courts. So the Congress determines the number of courts and judges at lower courts, as in lower than the Supreme Courts. So here are the district courts mapped. I think we might have seen this the other day. Here's the Ninth Circuit, which is known for its kind of wacky court decisions. Here's some more enumerated powers of Congress. There are military powers. They can declare war. The president does not do this. Apparently, this little picture went over the words does not do this, but the president does not declare war. Congress declares war. They are in charge of creating an army and a navy. They can make the rules for the military and raise or spend money for it. So one thing that Congress recently did was end the don't ask, don't tell policy that had been in place in the 90s, which was trying to deal with homosexuality in the military. It said, as long as you don't say anything about it, nobody's going to ask you about it. But if you do say something about it, then you might be subject to being fired. So they ended that. Now you can be openly gay and serve in the military. They also are in charge of raising and spending money for the military. So if they don't like the action a president has taken. So let's say that the president thinks there's an immediate threat in Iran and he sends troops to Iran. In several days, if Congress decides, I don't want to spend any money on Iran, we don't think we should be in Iran, they can just refuse to fund it. And then the president would have to send those troops home. He would run out of cash. They can call for the militia, the National Guard, to defend the nation. People who are in the National Guard most of the time stay here in the U.S. Then there are implied powers. So these are different from enumerated powers. They're not explicitly listed. And they come from this elastic clause, which says that we can make laws necessary and proper. So they can make laws that feels are needed. Sometimes it's called the general welfare clause because it says to make laws providing for the general welfare of the people. And that's part of how they justify making laws like the recent health care law. They say it's for the general welfare. Congress cannot do certain things. These things are explicitly denied to the federal government. They cannot suspend habeas corpus, so they cannot suspend the rule of habeas corpus. Habeas corpus says you can't arrest somebody without charging them with a crime. So they can't suspend that. They can't say, yes, now you can arrest somebody without charging them with a crime. They can't create ex post facto laws, which are created to punish something legal by making a new law to make that act illegal. You cannot be arrested for actions in the past that weren't illegal when you did them.